Welcome to the Swedish Genealogist. Today we'll take a look at Swedish names, which is important to understand when you're conducting your research. Before we take a look at names, we'll be taking a look at the Swedish alphabet. Then we'll discuss the Swedish names with topics such as given or first names. Next we'll discuss patronymic naming, surnames between 1860 and 1901, followed by soldier names, nature names, and priest surnames. Then we'll take a look at how illegitimate children were documented, and finally we'll discuss what happened with names when someone moved to the United States. The Swedish alphabet has 3 additional letters: the A with the overring, the A with the umlaut, and the O with the umlaut, and they follow Z in the alphabet, which is important to know when you're looking up words. For example, if we were looking for this place name, we would mistakenly look here, when in fact it should go here because of the overring. Similarly, if we were looking up this place name, we would again tend to look here, when it belongs alphabetically here after the A with the overring. Lastly, when you're looking for this place name, we might look here when alphabetically it belongs here. For your reference, I've included how to type these characters easily with your 10-number keypad, making sure that your numbers lock is on. This will not work unless you have the number keypad on your keyboard. Mac users can follow these instructions to type the letters. Now we'll dive right into Swedish names. One of the most important things to remember is not to get hung up on how a name is spelled. The person recording the name normally wouldn't ask how someone's name was spelled. He would just write it down how he thought it was spelled. Another thing to understand is that names are interchangeable, such as Michael and Mike. If someone's name was Johan, you might see it written as Jan in another record. Many Swedish names can be written several different ways. For instance, you might see Peter written these ways, Maria can be written these ways, and Katharina these. And they will be interchangeable from record to record, and you'll see it all the time. Surnames are equally tricky. The patronymic system was predominant throughout Sweden. It was mostly used in farming villages where people did not have a family surname. Technically not a surname, what it means is that the child was known as the son or the daughter of a certain man. This was used mostly until 1860. Between 1860 and 1901, it was not mandatory to use a certain surname, and then in 1901, a law was passed to adopt a family surname, although some still used the patronymic system. One good thing that's helpful in your research is that women normally retained their own name after marriage up until around the 1920s, especially if their husband had a patronymic surname. Finally, names could be abbreviated if they were too long. Like their given names, the priest responsible for recording the name would shorten it to save time, so you might see variations from record to record. So let's see some examples of how the patronymic system works. If, for example, Magnus Munson were to have a son Johan, he would be given the surname Magnusson, meaning he is Johan, son of Magnus. If he were to have a daughter Britta, she would be known as Britta Magnusdotter, meaning she is Britta, daughter of Magnus. Now let's take a look at what would happen if Johan had children. His son Nils would be known as Nils Johansson, and his daughter Lisa would be known as Lisa Johansdotter. The best thing about the patronymic names is that we can reverse engineer this to help find the father. Let's take a look at an example. If we were trying to locate who Johan's parents were, we would have a great starting place with regards to the father. With what looks like a patronymic surname, we can pretty much assume that his father's name is Magnus, depending on the time frame we're searching. But it's a good clue regardless. With a normal surname, you would have no clue. Between 1860 and 1901, it was when people started adopting permanent surnames like we have here in America. But there was no set standard as to how this would happen. Many families would adopt a new surname, and many would continue with the patronymics. You might also see a combination of the two with children as well. For instance, Magnus's son Johann might go by the patronymic Magnusson, or take his father's patronymic name as his surname. In 1901, a law was passed for families to adopt a permanent surname. So we'll now find that the children either took their father's patronymic surname or created an entirely new one. Soldiers either took or were given a surname once contracted, usually something meaningful such as bullet, sharp, or guard, or they could be location-based, and this was done to avoid confusion. Otherwise, it was possible that there could be two or more people with the same name, such as Johan Andersson, as the surname followed the patronymic naming. The soldier names were usually given up once they discharged, and the surname was passed on to his replacement. Although it was not uncommon for the soldier to pass his soldier surname on to his children. These are just some things to consider when researching soldiers. When people would adopt a permanent surname, some of the names they came up with are the nature names. They could either be the first half or the second half of the surname, or a combination of the two, or even just the one word. Priests adopted Greek or Roman names, which you might find were appended with Anders or IUS. A fun fact is that, like in the United States, males will sometimes take the woman's surname upon marriage. When researching, you might come across illegitimate children, which will be recorded with these two words. Let's take a look at how these words were recorded in the records. Looking at this birth record for my ancestor, Johann Peter, we see that underneath his given name, he is listed as illegitimate. You might find a father's name given, but in this case, we see that his father was listed as unknown. We also note that his mother's name was Britta Lisa Larsdottir. So what happens when only the mother's name is listed? It was possible that Johann Peter, my ancestor, went by a matronymic surname like Brittisson, meaning son of Britta. He could have adopted a form of his mother's surname, either with daughter or son attached, most likely Larsson since he was male. He could have taken his father's surname. Just because his father wasn't listed doesn't mean the father was unknown to the family. He could have taken the patronymic name from his father. He could have taken an altogether new surname, such as his stepfather's name, or given a patronymic surname from his stepfather. Now let's take a look at what I found for Johann Peter in the records. Johann Peter ended up taking the surname Isaacson. Now, because I have no documentation to the contrary to prove otherwise, I have no idea what this surname implies, as we saw in the last slide. This will most likely cause this branch of your family to become a brick wall unless you can find some explanation in the records. Fortunately, in one of the household examinations, I was able to locate this record here, where Johann Peter was listed. Over on the right-hand side, we see some writing under the heading of Special Notes. Let's take a look at what I found. Here we see that the priest noted that Johann Peter's father, Isaac Isaacson, lives in Wanga, and that his mother was dead. Now this gives me clues to where the father lived and his name. When Swedes immigrated to the United States, you will most likely find that their Swedish names were changed. However, despite popular belief, if their names did change, it was not because some official at Ellis Island did it. If the name changed, it was because of the person themselves or their parents. Some of the things that you will run into will be that they will drop the double S in the son names, but not always. They will drop letters altogether. The V often changed to a W. The letters with the diacritics became A, O, and U. First names would be Americanized. And sometimes they would take their parents' surname or a variation. For an example, Stina Nilsdottir daughter of Nils Eriksson, arrived in America and became Christina Eriksson. Let's take a look at a few examples of what I found for my 2 times great-grandfather. In the Swedish records, I found my 2 times great-grandfather's name was listed as Nils Johan Munson. M-A with the overring, N-S-S-O-N. Next, in the Gothenburg passenger list, they only listed his first name and dropped 1 S altogether. When he was living in the United States, he was listed in the census as Nelson Munson with a U and 1 S, also Americanizing his first name to Nelson. In the city directory for the same year as that census, he was listed as Nelson Munson spelled with an O. A few years later, I found him listed as Nils, seemingly reverting back to his Swedish name. To sum it up, if you keep in mind all the possibilities of the names, you'll have much better success in your research. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, I can be reached by email at theswedishgenealogist@gmail.com. I've started a Facebook group where I'll post videos, give advice, or share files. Find me on Instagram at theswedishgenealogist. And finally, subscribe to my YouTube channel for the latest videos. If there's a subject you would like me to post, feel free to leave a comment. Thank you.